Welcome to Keyword Saratoga. I'm Seth Merrow from Equidaily.com and right here on Capital OTB TV. Sitting as I do every Monday morning with Steve Bick of Sirius Satellite Radio's At the Races, Sirius and XM, which airs every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noontime. And of course, on Mondays, the miracle of technology, you're actually on the radio with a show that was done yesterday. So yeah, it's always fun to make the most of the joys of technology.
Well, we've got to make the most of every day up here, 40 days of racing. We hit the halfway point, Seth, over the weekend, and here we go. Second half coming. We got Alabama week. We've got Travers week. We've got closing week, Woodward, and what's going to be a terrific second half of the Saratoga season.
And as you say, Saturday was day 20, the halfway point, and as always on the Equidaily site, I do a scorecard, all the public handicappers at the halfway point and at the end of the meet. So if you check out the Equidaily site, it's always fun to see. There are probably, this year I think 28 or so, but more than a couple dozen public handicappers that I follow from the local newspapers, the New York tabloids, the Daily Racing Forum. And it's fun to see when a group of handicappers focus on a single meet, every race, every day, and see how they compare. So Saturday night I put up the totals through the first half of the meet. As I say, you can check that out on Equidaily. Dave Litvin is leading the pack, and I think he had 66 winners, something like that after Saturday. I was sitting Saturday about 52 or 53. So I got to make it up in the stretch, but that's always fun.
Well, the winners, picking winners is nice, and there's certainly races at Saratoga each and every summer that the public handicappers are going to zero in on, and you're going to get those winners. That portion of it isn't as important as what happened yesterday in terms of making money. And over the last several days, there's been key horses, Seth, that have popped up, and this is what the meet's all about. And whether they win or whether they finish second, getting on them and making money is the most important part of what happens here each and every summer. And you can't get every one. You're going to miss opportunities here and there, but capitalizing. No one says you're supposed to have that Dallas Stewart winner yesterday, Marvell Gay, a horse that you wouldn't have looked twice at in that maiden race that had all kinds of well-bred babies and a couple of second-time out horses. So you keep rolling and you keep panning for gold, as it were, each and every day. And hats off to the public handicappers. I put out my selections on a daily basis, and the win percentage, it doesn't mean to me as much as did we make money today. That's the bottom line.
And that's a lot of the public handicappers now have also put that ROI on in the past few years, which is important. I've always said, though, the winners on top is kind of a false scorecard for public handicappers also, because I'm an exacta player, and I'm happy if my second choice wins and my first choice runs second, and I get a nice exacta out of it, but that's not going to get me anything on that handicapper scorecard. But that's the way they've been doing it for years, so we're kind of stuck there.
Those numbers represent an era that is long bygone in handicapping and horseplay. I mean, that's just the reality. What's happened is the exotics and the multi-race makes it that much more important, and this is where you're going to make your money. And the pick threes, the pick fours, we've had huge overlaid pick fours as always, and pick threes that are outpaying the parlay. To me, that win percentage and those ROI numbers, whatever. There's plenty of players out there that can outperform, quote unquote, any of us by the way in which they utilize their bankroll. Nothing else matters.
And I wanted to point out a race from this past week that I thought the local handicappers did a great job, and that was the third race on Thursday, where Smokehouse ended up winning that race. I used Smokehouse on top as a handicapper, thought I would probably get those 7-2 morning line odds. I thought that was a decent price because this horse had debuted down at Monmouth on July 16th, 65 maiden claimer. Ran okay that day, but a 29 buyer figure. And I thought the betting public, there was a couple other horses in the race that were maybe a little interesting, some first-time starters. But this horse had been bred by Limehouse, and I think Limehouse is off to a nice start early in his stud career and was taking a little bit of a drop down the maiden claiming ranks. So for me, the horse was interesting, but I was kind of surprised that the betting public jumped on the horse as well. And to me, it just indicates how astute the handy. Every once in a while they'll miss one, but boy, the New York players are pretty smart.
There were actually two things at work in this race, however. There was also the sheep and the lemmings who went over the fall. eyeballs. And that were the ones that were following anything that Linda Rice puts out. And curiously, there's horses of Linda Rice's that are getting bet, like in this race. Point Gammon was a horrible play. Second choice, 2-1. It was a horse that you absolutely wanted to push down in your handicapping rankings, and you wanted to avoid. This was a race that I just partially skipped over in terms of the way in which I played it. It was part of the pick. This was part of a pick four, an early pick four that. I think this was part of the early pick four on Thursday, right?
Third race.
Yes,
so second race, early pick.
And I don't have Thursday in front of me, but I have it over here. But we had a very big pick four early, $3,800 for $2, and this race was part of the sequence. And Smokehouse may have gotten bet down to 3-2. I don't know if he was necessarily 3-2. She was 3-2 in the pick four. I find it interesting. There was another horse, I think later in the day even, of Linda Rice's that went unbet and went off at like 6-7-1. That absolutely should. That was farming. One of the
precision farming.
One of the farms, either smart or precision. There were 2 farmings this week from her. There was
precision farming one, I remember.
Okay,
so.
Then there's also smart farming was yesterday. But there's Linda Rice horses that are getting bet that shouldn't. Then there's Linda Rice horses that aren't getting bet that should. So you got to, I don't know, be discerning. But you're right. This was a very interesting chart to go back and look at the odds.
Another just kind of reflecting nationwide for the week. Russell Bayes.
11,000.
11,000. Yeah, which is incredible. I mean, that's a mind-boggling number. The next highest total in North America, Lafitte Pinkai, who was 9,000 and something. Active, I think it's Edgar Prado with 6,000 and something. So, I mean, you look at, comparatively speaking, Russell Bayes, 11,000, just incredible. And then he made a comment, something like, hopefully I'm back here celebrating 12,000 in a couple of years. And the way he puts those wins together in Northern California would be shocking.
When he's, when you're riding 3 to 5 shots in 7 races at Golden Gate, you can rack up some win totals. Not to knock Russell Bayes, but I mean, he's been the big fish in the small pond up there for decades.
Still an incredible accomplishment, and he did. He's done it in the big pond too, because the day before he set the record, he was at Del Mar, won the stakes race down there. So, he ships around. But he's a guy, I think his home's in Northern California, so I don't blame him for staying there. His home's up there. That's where he raised his family, and he likes it up there. And he's making a great living.
There's lots of guys. We'll have that part of that conversation when Ron Anderson joins us, Jock's agent to the stars. Of course, with Jerry Bailey and now with Garrett Gomez. And that's, Ramon Dominguez is a guy that does similarly. I mean, he's riding obviously at the highest level and is the leading rider in New York on a going basis with these riding titles piling up. But he, in the winter, you would think that he'd be down in Florida, but Ramon likes to stay with the family and not go off and run down there and spend the summer at Gulfstream, and that's admirable. There's no doubt. Tony Black joins me weekly on At the Races. Tony's been the big dog in Philadelphia for 4 decades. He's got 5,200 wins that he's piled up at Atlantic City and the old Keystone and Liberty Bell and et cetera. And there's guys that do that. They're close to home and they dominate in their local area, and there's nothing wrong with that. We'll talk to Ron Anderson, though, about what he's been doing and the way Garrett Gomez has been, kind of cherry-picking top mounts. The performance on Saturday, we'll take a minute here. The Sword Dancer victory, repeat for Steve Hobby, who hightailed it back to Delaware, took the trophy, took the money, and went back to Delaware Park. Steve Hobby, 2 years in a row with Telling. And, I included him, and I boxed up some horses and did okay in the race with the other obvious horses. But I tell you, Seth, you looked back at those PPs, and you looked at the United Nations performance of Telling. He actually came into the race in better shape and in a better performance arc than he had gone into last year's Sword Dancer when he was 33-1. So it was an interesting edition of the Sword Dancer with between Grand Couturier and Telling. You had the winners of the last 3 years. It's kind of fun. Now maybe next year, if Grand Couturier comes back, you could have winners of the last 5 Sword Dancers.
I'm like you. I didn't use him on top, but I had him in the mix just on the fact that, year to year, it's horse for a course maybe. Were they pointing for this? But it was a situation of Telling had not won a race since the 2009 Sword Dancer until he won the 2010 Sword Dancer. So it was a tough one to put on top, but it was one I think you had to use in your mix. And heading back to the jockey standings right now, John Velasquez on top, 28 wins, Castellano 24, Ramon Dominguez 21. So I think all three of those are still kind of knocking heads. You go down to the trainers. Todd Pletcher's put a little room between him and Chad Brown. Pletcher with 17, Chad with 12. You have Mott and Rice both with 9. So the trainers' battles. I mean, we're just at the halfway point, so there's still a lot of time in this meet.
There's some interesting little subsets that go on if you look at the jockey and trainer standings. And one of them, and we can talk with Ron Anderson, who's going to join us after this. I mean, here's Garrett Gomez. Numerically, he's sitting with how many wins? 7. Where is? Yeah, you've got this thing all cockeyed. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Yeah, 10 wins and 76 mounts, but $1.2 million in earnings. In other words, he's cherry-picking a lot of stakes opportunities, and he's winning on them. And so Garrett Gomez taking advantage, 10 wins, 12 seconds, and 9 thirds. Then you look at a couple of guys that are on the march. Ramon Dominguez, very quietly and efficiently, is starting to pile up the wins. And the other guy that very quietly is getting into a groove is Kent DeSormo. And Kent, certainly the subject of frequent criticism, a lot of it unfairly. Kent DeSormo yesterday, for instance, the terrific performance on the maiden upsetter for Dallas Stewart on Marvell Gay, beautifully timed, gets the money and beats Kieran McLaughlin's filly, who ran an unbelievably game race on the front end. So the jockey action, which people really love to follow, and people are so funny, I hear them say, oh, I've got to use this jockey, I got to use. If you used every jockey that had to be used, you'd be boxing 7 horses in every race.
And that's the same thing. It happens every year. Pletcher sends one every year that pays $20 or $30, and people say, how did we miss that? Well, you can't play every Pletcher horse, and so, you got to pick your spots and kind of factor those, the top jockeys, the top trainers into the mix, but you can't use them every time. One that also wanted to point out, Freddie Lonclou, who the apprentice who came up hot from Churchill earlier this year, 5 wins so far at the meet, so he's having a nice meet.
You talk about coming in hot. There were some other guys that came in hot who have just gone absolutely dead. Cornelio Velasquez had a tremendous meet at Belmont and was riding great. Now suddenly can't win, and the Jose Lezcano fiasco just continues unabated. And I mean,
you mentioned too that the real aberrations on the standings here, because they're jumping off the board with their second and third place finishes, both of those guys. But on the win end, as you say, they've gone a little cold. So they're riding well, but not as well as they were riding before.
I don't know. That's a tough thing to decipher. When trainers get a lot of seconds and thirds, depending on what kind of stock they have, a lot of times that means their horses actually are running great and they're hitting the board and they're outrunning their odds. When a jock is getting disproportionate seconds and thirds, he's not riding well.
Fair enough.
Especially when Jose Lezcano is getting Cadillacs from Zito, who's winless, tries today maybe with Dark Cove to break the schneid, and from Chad Brown. I mean, he's getting Zito and Brown horses. You're not supposed to be running second and third with those. And it's not that Jose Lezcano hasn't forgotten how to win. He hasn't forgotten how to ride. Guys get into these funks, and then every single decision they make, it makes things worse. It's very hard. He'll get a win, and then it'll trigger, 3, 4, 5 days where he'll get multiple winners, and he'll end up where he belongs in the standings. But right now, I called him a human anchor on Saturday. He's just dragging horses down.
That's a fair enough point. I think that the aberration between the win and the seconds and thirds may be telling you something underneath the radar there a little bit. Looking at where winners have come from, we're halfway through the meet, and what jumped out at me, I keep track of where the horses raced last before they won up here. Certainly Belmont with 90 winners at the meet so far, having come from Belmont to win next out here, is at the top of the list, as would be expected. But we're at a point now where horses who have raced here and have a race over the track are starting to jump out. Last week, when we sat here, only 4 horses had raced so far at Saratoga and come back to win. This week there's 17. So now we're deep enough into the meet where some of these horses are getting a feel for the track, and you can look for some of these Saratoga horses to come back. One that jumped off at me, Indiana Downs jumped out with a winner this week, and I think that may be a factor in their slots-fueled purses. They're having some better horses out there.
Well, there were some purses. There was that period. Horses that are going to have run at Indiana Downs are going to come from Dale Romans, maybe from Tommy Proctor, and some of the other Churchill-based guys who had a little intermezzo there before Ellis opened. And before they shipped here, they would have gone up either at the end of the Hoosier meet or at the beginning of the Indiana meet. And Indiana had a series of like $70,000 overnight stakes. The Florence Henderson, one of my favorites.
It goes with the Shirley Jones down in Florida.
There
So
you
you
go.
got the Brady
local
Bunch and with the
Partridge family.
There you go.
Or, if you want to see Shirley Jones in a tremendous performance, Elmer Gantry is the movie to watch.
There you go, with Burt Lancaster.
Absolutely.
Okay. And anything else to add to this, or should we head to the break?
I think a Shirley Jones, Florence Henderson reference absolutely stops the segment.
I just wanted to, before we do go to the break, first I want to remind you that we like to thank our sponsors, White Horse Stables and Karakoram Racing.
It's Whitehall, isn't it?
Whitehall Stables and Karakoram Racing. It is Whitehall, yes, you got it. And we particularly like to get their name right when we're thanking them. So, but I also wanted to mention over on the front side over the past few weeks, got some nice comments from people, and that's always nice. Television is a funny medium because we sit here and the viewers are many miles away, so you don't get that immediate feedback. So it's nice to be over there on the front side, hear from folks who have nice things to say about the show, questions, comments. And we want to remind you, if you do see us over there, come up and say hello. Always happy to talk to you. But if you're not over at the track, you can catch us at viewermail at capitalotv.com. You have any kind of questions or comments. Viewermail, capitalotv.com. Right now, we're going to take our first break. When we return, Ron Anderson will join us on Keyword Saratoga. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Keyword Saratoga. I'm Seth Merrow, joined by Steve Vick every week here on Monday morning, and we're joined right now by Agent Ron Anderson. And if you don't recognize Ron, you certainly recognize his work, a longtime agent for Jerry Bailey, now working for Garrett Gomez. And Ron, I'm always curious, jockey's agent isn't one of those careers that has an obvious career path. It's not you start here and aim to be a jockey agent. So how did you get in the racing game, and how did you then become a jockey's agent?
1973, I was going to school, going to college, and I took somebody nobody really wanted. So I just kind of took it on a whim, and I knew some guys on the track. And my big break was in 1980. I ended up with a rider named Fernando Toro in California.
Sure.
And if I'm ever considered to be a good agent, I think it's because working for him. He kind of explained to me the horse end of it and the people end of it, and I was very fortunate to hook up with him. Then I had Gary Stevens, and I had Chris Antley, and I had Jerry Bailey. So I've been lucky.
I guess so. And you say you started in college or just after college?
Well, I was in college at the time, and I don't want to go to school for a little while there. Why don't I try this? And I kind of, what would you say, parlayed it into some awfully good talent.
How did that spark your interest, though? I mean, how did you get the idea of jockey's agent?
Well, I grew up as a fan with my family. My mother and father used to come in on the weekends in California. I had two friends, Craig O'Brien and Scotty McClellan, whose fathers had just set them up in the game. And I just, I kind of walked into, look, I want to try this. I love the track. I found myself in school trying to run out to watch races. And I said, you know what, let's try this for a while. And I've been lucky.
Give us a little bit of an idea, a day in the life of a jock's agent. Let's say a typical day over here at Saratoga, and maybe your guy, Garrett Gomez, has mounts into the 8th or the 9th race in the day. So what happens after that alarm goes off for you in the morning till you pack things away?
The alarm doesn't go off because in my mind, I love what I'm doing. I wake up early on my own. I like to tell people that the phones actually changed. Well, they changed the world, but the cell phones really changed our business because like this morning, Wayne Lucas is calling me at 5:45. And I really, with the products lots of times that I've represented, I tell people I could work out of a phone booth or I could be anywhere and they can always contact me. But I get up, I kind of make my round. The intensity factor at Saratoga, like I tell people, everything that's done here is magnified like 20 times. Training, winning, riding, winning, gambling and winning, whatever, because everybody's watching. So it's intense. It's 6 days where we're usually used to 5 and 4 days anymore. So you wake up early, you get out here, make your rounds. The phone's usually ringing. There's texting going on. 9:30, quarter to 10, usually kind of on my way home to either get showered or do some work over the internet. Back here at 12:15 for the draw. Hang out usually most of the afternoon. Back home to watch some races. So there's usually by 7 o'clock at night I'm tired and I don't go out a whole lot. And then the next day comes. We get Tuesdays off. That's about it.
Exactly. Funny you mentioned you're doing the job in the phone booth. Some jockeys agents have been known to live in phone booths.
Yes.
It's not the most secure position out there on the racetrack, and I get the kick about Seth saying, wanting to be a jock agent. There'll be some raised eyebrows in fourth grade classes if some kid was to say, I want to grow up to be a jock's agent, because there's few and far between.
I get these emails and these calls all the time. A kid from, where was he? Hot Springs, Arkansas. Never been on a racetrack. Called the. I said, look, it's pretty simple. If you can find somebody that can ride that they want, it's fun and it's easy. But if you don't have a product and you don't know what you're doing, it's not fun. It's like anything else.
Ron, juxtapose for everybody the kinds of relationships and the unique aspects of the job when you, in one case, may have a young rider that may be new to the United States, whether it's a European import like L'Enclos and Leparoux that have come in recent years, or if it's somebody from Latin America or South America. Talk about how that relationship and that portion of the job is different when you've also got a Garrett Gomez or a Jerry Bailey in the prime of their careers.
There's not a blueprint for doing any of this, but when I went to work for Gary Stevens, Chris Antley, they all had some sort of a built-in clientele, which makes it a lot. I had my clientele, guys that I dealt with, they had theirs, so you just kind of fit it together. The new guys, the Freddie L'Enclos, who I think rides a decent race, there's no blueprint on it. You just have to just keep what I call beating the bushes, digging the trenches, seeing people, throwing them on as many as you can for the right, the right people. And as you cultivate their business and they get better, they end up with better clientele. And it's just a lot of hard work is what it is.
In addition to the challenges of working with riders and developing their careers if it's a young rider, or maintaining guys at the highest level and getting them the best mounts, there's a lot of itinerant lifestyle involved. And in fact, you, after the years with Jerry Bailey, then Jerry's retirement, you moved to California. For you, it's an upheaval to go out there, and you've got to establish new relationships with new sets of trainers. Not that there wasn't anybody from previous years you didn't know well, and you can't get it back up and going. But there's still certain challenges. Talk about what it's like to have to live an itinerant lifestyle.
Well, in theory, it's cost me one marriage. But that just didn't work out. It's not easy, but my deal is, I like to come to Saratoga. At this point, it's a better situation than going to Del Mar. I like to deal with the elite owners and trainers, Steve standing right here, Steve Asmussen, Todd Pletcher, Billy Mott. It's fun for me to see the elite racing, deal with the elite horsemen, horse trainers, owners. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm 55 years old. I've been doing this since 1973, and it's it's fun for me. This is the high end of it, and that's what I'm used to, and that's what I like.
You talk about the elite riders, the elite mounts, the top trainers. Interesting that Garrett Gomez through today has got two very big wins, between the win in the Whitney on Blame for Al Stahl, and then on Saturday Telling winning the Sword Dancer. And I thought it was telling, quote unquote, that of the 10 wins, I think it's come with 7 different trainers. You've got Tommy Proctor, you've got Al Stahl, Bill Mott, Dave Duggan, Chad Brown, Steve Hobby, Wayne Lucas, Chris Clement. So the obvious respect and the continuity of having Garrett on these kinds of trainers' horses in big spots, I mean, is pretty apparent. And even though you're not taking 6-7 calls a day, you're picking and maintaining relationships with the best trainers and the best horses.
Well, we went to Monmouth Park thinking that meet was going to escalate and be really, really good. It didn't really go that way. And like I told somebody the other day, if you look at the roster here of riders, this is probably more riders and deeper than anywhere I've ever been. There's at least 15 or 16 guys that you would put on in a second. Usually there's, even back in the old days when McCarran and Shue and Lafitte and all that, they were 8 or 10 deep. Here I think you're looking at least a dozen to 15 really good riders, and it makes it hard. Fields are not real big sometimes. We're just kind of piecing things together, and things are really starting to go the right way right now.
We're just watching here the finish, and here's Telling just taking over. This was a very, very clever ride, and in fact, Garrett Gomez new to Telling, and this performance was really exceptional. I mean, he had some issues early on to get through, and then when Garrett asked him, he had everything his way at the end.
I think at this point we've led the nation the last 4 years in money, the 4 years I've worked for him, and I think he's had a run with stakes that's probably, I don't know, I don't think anybody else is close to the number of stakes that we've won. And he's obviously a money rider, it's the way it is right now. We're doing fine.
Well, it's always great, Ron Anderson, to have you visit. You've been such a great contributor at the races whenever I've called, and I thought it'd be fun for people to get a feel for what goes on, the life of a jocks agent operating at this kind of a level.
Yeah, jocks agents are a real behind-the-scenes job that is necessary at the racetrack and really makes it go, but it's something that I think people on the front side are totally unaware of, so it's kind of fun to hear what that's all about.
It's a high wire act, folks. It's not for the faint of heart.
And so all you 4th graders out there, start sending in the resume. Take another break now on Keyword Saratoga. When we come back, we'll be joined by Steve Asmussen. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Keyword Saratoga. Happy now to be joined by Steve Asmussen of Curlin fame, Rachel Alexandra fame, and many other horses here at the Saratoga meet. Steve, before we start and get into the meat of what you're going to be doing up here and let's talk about some of your horses, I was always fascinated when I go back and look at your bio. You spent some time as a jockey. Give us a little idea of what the jockey career was like.
Well, I'm Cash's younger big brother, but all the success that he had riding and the talent that he possessed, it jumped me. So I held a license for a while, but I don't know if I was actually a jockey.
How long did you ride?
A couple years. I actually had my apprenticeship here in New York for, didn't quite finish out the end of it, about 8-9 months, and then got a little heavy and went home to the Midwest and rode at a little higher scale of weights about another year and a half.
I think you made a good career change, though. I think it's worked out.
It's worked out well. It worked out well.
Give us a little idea of your background, though, before we get into it. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get into the racing game?
Well, my parents, my father was a jockey until he was in his 45, 50. And my mom was a trainer most of my life until she turned things over to me. And grew up in the winters in Laredo, Texas, summers in New Mexico, mixed meets. Just very fortunate to be around a lot of nice horses.
And you mentioned Cash, who was obviously a leading rider here in America, but then went over leading rider in Europe too. But now he's transitioned over to training. So he had a winner out of Del Mar the other day.
He's training horses on his own and having some success.
So he was giving you a little advice on the jockey side. Now you're giving him a little advice on the training side?
Yes. Yeah, Cash giving me advice as a jockey. He just didn't quite, I can't quite do that. Okay.
He changed things in a lot of ways in Europe with the style, with the that kind of.
He's a tremendous horseman. The talent he possesses is amazing, and I think that he'll translate that into a trainer soon.
Well, you certainly have created, Steve, an enviable business, and in terms of the modern training methods and the modern industrial operation. Just looking earlier today at the list of starters around North America, give everybody an idea. I mean, of how many people that are working under and with you. You've got the tremendous set of assistants, starting with Scott Blasi, and then all the way down to the farm, where a lot of the yearlings get broken and get started on. It's remarkable, and I don't think people realize how many different jurisdictions you're operating in.
Well, I think racing right now is kind of tumultuous times. I mean, where we're going to be tomorrow and exactly where it's headed is definitely been in question with VLTs and what state racing under what rules, and that's caused us to spread out. I think that it's if racing would get a little more direction, we'd be able to streamline it a little bit, and I think that the Curlin and Rachel, horses of that caliber, have given us a taste of where we want to be. But we've been blessed with a tremendous amount of opportunity. Want to stay loyal to where we're from and what we've done. But none of this happens without the tremendous owners that we've had and had throughout the years, and the assistants that you have mentioned with Scott. Toby Sheets is New York year-round. Can't say enough about the job he's done and the success that he's had. And Darren Fleming and Pat Devereaux, the job that they've done is the reason for the success.
The thing that's amazing, and for those that watch an operation like yours from afar, the thing that they wonder about is how you keep in touch and how you keep on top. And I just know from your owners, from Satish Sanan and from Ro Para, and from the variety of top people that have associated with you as their trainer, they are stunned at your remarkable ability to keep tabs on horses that have your name attached to them. I mean, throughout the operation. And if an owner, Jerry Brown has told me that when he has talked to Ro Para, you know exactly what each horse has done. What if one had a temperature somewhere that you weren't in attendance, but you just have. How do you manage it, Steve? Honestly, it's.
Well, I think that it's the job that you mentioned, that the people that are there that they're doing. I think the communication that we have is essential. We do exactly what we think is right all the time, and what is best, and that's what will continue. I appreciate you saying, the nice things, but you always feel like you can do better. You get up in the morning and you do the job in front of you, and you do it to the best of your ability, and you continue to do that. I think that you're just in a position, though, you feel like you can do better. You always feel like you can do better.
Has technology allowed you to have be spread out the way you are? I mean, how important is the internet in what you do every day in managing those horses?
Well, I definitely like my iPhone. Just it's amazing. How you can watch all of your races. You can watch, everything. It is amazing. Claim a horse and then take a picture of it and send it to you. I mean, it's you just that quick.
It's changed being a fan, and I think it's
right.
changed.
You make your rounds, you see your things, and you're familiar with one, and they'll jog it and videotape it with their phone and send it over to you, and you watch it. And you just have the dialogue, and you're trying to work everything in a positive direction. We want to do what's right for the owners, and racing can be very tough financially, and making the most of what opportunities that we do have. We just feel very strongly that every horse has so many good races in them, and we want to make the most of it. And if they don't suit where you're at, find somewhere that it does suit. Coming from a family that has a lot of racehorses and grew up in a family like that, when they walk off the track, somebody's still feeding them, and you gotta make the most of what chances you've got given. And I think that me and the entire staff respect the opportunity and want to make the most of it.
You talk about the opportunities. I had to print out a couple of PPs on specific horses that are either run already at the meet or are going to run. Certainly Rachel Alexandra, who had a very nice, little bit more than a maintenance breeze, you'd say today?
We asked her to work well. I thought it was very important. Her 3/4 on the Oklahoma training track last week was very good, very nice, smooth, what we were hoping for. And I thought her work today was very good in the fact that it was very consistent, steadily picked it up slightly, and her gallop out was very strong. And it's where
she was on the main track today,
on the main track this morning, and felt very comfortable going into the 1 1/4 of the personal instant on the 29th.
Talk about that for a moment, Steve, because the 1 1/4, she hasn't gone this kind of a distance since the Preakness victory, the 1 3/16 that day. In terms of what you've been working at the entire year with her, I heard nothing but positives from Calvin Burrell and from you and from Scott Blasi about more than just the win at Monmouth, but more, especially from Calvin, how she felt and how on the muscle she was, and also the gallop out past the wire. I mean, he had to stand up on her all the way back around the backstretch. In terms of making this transition back to the 1 1/4 and facing life at 10 a week from Sunday, where do you feel she is? How are you feeling?
We feel great about her physically. I think we do have some subtle mental changes in the mare, with her being a year older, carrying a little bit more weight. Everybody wants to compare her being the same this year to last year. When last year she came into the barn 4 days off of the Oaks, 10, 11 days previous to the Preakness, that level of pressure and expectation on her, has not been matched. So I think that the approach, where we're at right now, I think that we're a little more settled, just like her work today. She was aggressive to the pole. She turned off very easily in the middle. She was around the turn. She had to be gathered up to accelerate. I think she's not as aggressive as she was last year, possibly. She's carrying a little bit more weight. She is a year older, I think, but I'm very, very pleased with her attitude, how settled she is. She doesn't seem to be as emotional about everything that happens. I think she's been steadier. But I think now it's time to pick it up and to use this weight, this age, this strength, and try to finish off the year very well.
And certainly the victory in the Ladies' Secret, and you go back to the romp and the fleur-de-lis, people are so quick and have been so critical, those that, and I'm not going to separate this into the Rachel Alexandra Zenyatta discussion, but when you go back, and I watched the race from New Orleans and also the La Troyenne, and those were big performances from the foes. I mean, whether it was Zardana or whether it was Bill Mott's filly, the Unbridled Bell, they rose to the occasion at the same time that you're trying to move forward with the filly on a training scale that was somewhat forced on you.
I think it's circumstances. Very disappointed that she lost. You know, you have a separate set of, you know, emotions. Very disappointed that she lost, not expecting her to be beaten. Definitely on Rachel's side, you know, we know who we're rooting for. But I think it was outstanding performances on that day by different fillies. From a time figure or a number rating, it's not that surprising. I mean, she ran solid for her first and second start of the year. It's very comparable to the beginning of last year for her.
Yep.
Just different company and different circumstances. And, you know, I've always said, it's assure the outcome, they'll let you bet on it. You know, we've seen some, just stick around. You'll see something different.
Why don't we shift gears to today? You got what I think is a monster coming up later
Yes.
today. Now, we're looking at possibly some rain in the forecast, so what are your expectations if that happens? But we're going to take a look at the Bashford Manor here of Cantaros winning that one off by, just for fun, and it comes back this afternoon. So give us a little feel for what you expect this afternoon.
Well, we're very excited about Cantaros. He's a top-class horse, belongs to Stone Street Stables, Mr. Jackson. John Moynihan bought this OVS March, Ocala Breeder sale in March from Eddie Woods. Colt came into the barn. He's a picture of health. He's done everything right, and we just hope that continues.
And sitting here, the number 3 horse, sitting about 4th on the outside here in the Bashford Manor.
He's run extremely well. You mentioned the rain and the weather today. I actually would be a little more comfortable with it raining than as loose as the racetrack has possibly been the last couple of days. He is a very quick horse. I mean, we're aware of that. Saratoga can be a little different to quick horses. You know, it can definitely be trying. It's definitely a different kind of test from a surface standpoint.
For a 2-year-old, though, that was a great race. I mean, he sat behind the horses kindly early and then made the next
Actually
move
had a
on the
little
turn
stumble away from the gates, immediately gathered himself. But we're hoping, Majestic Perfection, a similar horse like this, a fast horse that does things right that you're trying to maintain. Whereas, you know, we're just trying to get out of his way. First time we ran him, you know, just it's time to run him. He's done everything right. He ran extremely well. Waiting for the Bashford Manor was the hard part. Waiting for this, that's the hard part. You just want more of the same, but you're not necessarily looking to be faster. You just want to keep it between the fences.
Steve, you mentioned Majestic Perfection, and certainly you've got to take a minute and talk about the Vanderbilt performance that earned him his first graded stake opportunity, grade 1 win. Satish Sanan and Padua Stables, you got a big opportunity here. You went to the Breeders' Cup Sprint with Satish and Joe Irricane, going back a few years, right?
Steve Margolis won it with Cajun Beat. Steve Margolis was the trainer for them.
But you had Posse
that year, yes.
And also Buona Charlie, right?
Yes, he was the following year.
There you go. And in terms of the arc to get toward Breeders' Cup Sprint and back to Churchill, the Bosberg, I think, as the one start before you get to Churchill?
That is the plan, yes.
Cool. Well, I know Satish certainly excited about it, and 2 of the best performances of the year, the back-to-back at Prairie Meadows and in the Vanderbilt. I mean, he came, he's 4 years old, and I mean, talk about what you do as a trainer when you have a horse that you know has got this kind of freakish talent, but you have to be careful. You can't let him come apart.
Well, a horse is, as you mentioned, very fast horse, big, strong horse. When it was in the barn one time earlier, pretty body sore, just little things, nothing serious, just the physics of it, how fast he is, what he weighs, just would get a little body sore off his breezes. Chose to give him some time off. This Sanan family took him back to Ocala, sent him back in. He came back in great shape. We've been able to stay steady with him. Another horse, as you mentioned, just very fast from the get-go, I was very happy to see him put everything together here in the Vanderbilt. It being a grade 1 this year, I thought that was extremely important. And as you mentioned, hopefully the Vosberg previous to the Breeders' Cup, and I'm not looking for him to get better, but we'd like him to stay the same.
Steve, we're kind of butting up against the clock on the wall here. But before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about one of my favorites, a horse that I really had fun following. You got Curlin in the barn, you got Rachel Alexandra in the barn, but a horse, I just want to know how special was a horse like Golden Hair that you went and picked up for $3,500 and hit a complete home run. I'm not sure the total record, but the first 17 starts he made for you guys, 14 wins, 3/3, including a $50,000 claiming crown stake. How special is that kind of horse?
Well, he's a very special horse. He actually, Maggie Moss had claimed him back at Prairie Meadows, and we had him last fall at Remington, and he won a couple of races, and she gave him to Karen Murphy, and she uses him as a riding horse here in upstate, which is outstanding, you know, for a horse that gave everybody that much fun. Scott Blasey claimed him off of, I believe, he knew him from when we ran Posse in the Malibu at Santa Anita. Took the year Southern Image won it, and he showed up in for a lower claiming price off of a layoff, and Scott, just remembering what a pretty horse he was, wanted him, you know.
And then you just leave for the condition books and look for those starter allowances.
Yeah, exactly. That's when having several barns came in very handy.
Exactly. I'm going to ask you about one more that nobody knows about yet.
Okay.
Fast Station, the Hallingbrought filly. How good is she going to be?
She ran a great race the other night at Mountaineer, the other day. Their one day of day racing, West Virginia Derby Day. A nice little filly, valid expectations, very sentimental about him. Me and Scott are. Our first graded stakes winner in New York was valid expectations. And he got us going, and I think that he caused most of this. He's owned by the Ackerley brothers, and she is a valid expectations filly that has won 2 stakes her last 2 races.
Yeah.
The last time she jumped up, ran a very big figure. She's maturing nicely and runs some good races. She's owned by the Heidel Bros, who have had so much to do with all the success that we've ever had and continue to have.
Well, she caught my eye that day, and you got an 85 buyer.
She ran super.
She ran huge, Texas bred, and she was 42,000 in the Texas sale, which, I mean, that's a fair amount.
Right, Mr. Heidelbros has made some outstanding purchases in that category and at the Texas sale, and she's just another one that has stepped up for us and makes people think we're good at this, which is it's all because of the horses.
Wine Police, hopeful?
Hopeful.
Ash Z.
I was encouraged with her race the other day in the test, squeezed pretty bad away from her. Kind of a weighted room. I thought Rajiv gave her a very good ride, gave her a good chance, but I'm kind of anxious to let her stretch out watching that race. I think she's beautiful filly, conformation-wise and stuff. But she's gonna develop into a very top-class mare.
Well, it just shows you how this business works. You're training an exchange rate filly who, of course, was campaigned by Satish and owned by Ahmed Zayed.
Yes.
And in fact, Justin Phillip coming out
First Samurai on Thursday. Yes.
on Thursday.
Yes.
Pretty pricey. How's he shaping up?
He's the horse that got loose in the post parade on us last week. Scared us beyond belief. I guess we've had, if he doesn't make it as a racehorse, we've had several offers as a jumper. But I'm sure expecting him to and wanting to work out as a racehorse.
Well, Steve, we absolutely appreciate you making time.
Very
With
much.
Rachel
Thank
working
you.
this morning, Cantheros this afternoon. We know you have a busy day, but we wish you luck this afternoon with Cantheros, the rest of the meet, particularly with Rachel Alexandra. I'm looking forward to the personal ensign because one of my favorite days at the track was last year, the Woodward, just kind of soaking up the crowd reaction there, which I've never experienced before at the racetrack. So a lot of luck the rest of the meet, and we appreciate you being here this morning. We're going to take another break. When we come back, a couple of minutes with Michael Blowen from Old Friends as Keyword Saratoga continues.
Welcome back to Keyword Saratoga, Capital OTB, and here at the set, happy to welcome in Michael Blowen, who's been very much a part of the Saratoga season thus far. Before the meet started, old friends at Cabin Creek, the Bobby Frankel division, the opening, a smashing success, and Michael Blowen's work at Kentucky and now in New York with retired horses, not just retired sires as it started out, but Michael, welcome, and so glad you could come.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks a lot. It's been a great meet for us. People have really stepped up big up here in Saratoga for old friends, and these old horses. We got all these great Saratoga stars up here now, Thunder Rumble and Will's Way, and some not-so stars, Zippy Chippy. And the people here, there's not been one restaurant that's turned us down for an auction item. There's not, we walked into a bank, NTB Bank, and they gave us $1,000 right off the bat and said we'll put it in the budget next year. I mean, virtually the whole town has really come together to really help us to expand our facility up here so we can create more spaces for more of these great thoroughbreds.
Well, and in fact, I'm glad you mentioned just something triggered my memory. Wednesday, there is the retirement day here at Saratoga. Naira will be presenting checks to
That's
old
right.
friends, TRF, and
Exceller Fund.
Exceller Fund.
Yep,
There you
great.
go.
You know, yeah, they're going to give $5,000 to each of us, and then we're going to have a booth there. So if anybody's at the races on Wednesday, it'd be great to have them come over and say hello, and we can show them some of the video of the horses that we have. And you know, it's amazing that we started with one horse in 2003, and now we have more than 100. And they've won more stakes races than any farm in the history of racing. They've won 118 different stakes races in the United States, and some of them are multiple winners, like Frey's and Carrie's Town and Awad, all won the Sword Dancer. We've got Eclipse Award winners, and then it's so great because every day is like Christmas. We're either getting a new horse, and Bobby Frankel left us all his trophies, and Bobby left us some money, and I mean, it's like, I think it's a little bit like Steve. I mean, now he's got Rachel Alexander, he's got some great horses, and these horses do take you places even when they're retired.
Well, you had the concept. There is the Kentucky Horse Park, and of course had John Henry and have had other stars. But you had the concept of making these horses an attraction and trying to utilize their popularity and their fan bases as a way to broaden people's horizons in terms of the needs of off-the-track thoroughbreds and the specific need that you created, which was horses that had retired as stallions, which was a very specialized, they need special care, they can be aggressive, and it was a unique concept when you started this, and the growth has been just remarkable, and you've actually really kind of established some new ideas for fundraising and for what can be done to increase awareness and make better afterlives off the racetrack for retired thoroughbreds.
Yeah, I stole all my ideas from the horse farm. I figured if they're all going over to see John Henry and Forgo, you know, they would go to see some of the horses that I loved when I was first getting into racing and loving these animals. But the key to the whole thing is you can't always be begging for money. It's too tiring, it's boring. People go in the other direction when they see you coming. And I don't blame them because everybody, you know, there's the American Heart Association, there are all these other great horse groups that are doing a terrific job. But I think the key to the whole thing is these horses, you have to figure out some ways that they can generate income once their racing careers are over. And that's what this is our experiment, that if they can generate that income to support themselves, then the sky's the limit for how many you can retire. But if you always have your hand out and you're always begging for money, you know, it's not going to work.
And talk about some of the things that you've done. I mean, in terms of the fundraising opportunities and some of the innovations. I know Rerun has the Monets, for instance.
Rerun, we work with Rerun on the Monets all the time. In fact, they just sold a commentator up here for us.
For the New York sale, during the New York sale upstairs.
Yep. And
If people aren't familiar with the Monets, it's horse-painted paintings.
yes, the horses do abstract paintings. And some of them, actually, it's like a Rorschach test. You know, you can actually see horses in there if you look hard enough. It's like trying to find some of those winners yesterday.
Well, you were
Very difficult.
You were finding them. Michael Blowen may have found out a tremendous betting angle, which is utilizing connections of horses at old friends to bet horses. Yesterday, 2 winners at giant prices.
Yes.
That was hysterical.
We had a horse out of Williamstown, by Williamstown.
By Williamstown.
Who's Willie Fetz, and then, you know, had another big horse who was out of a Williamstown mare,
Yeah.
and the pick 4 came back $50-something thousand, and it just goes to prove, it's not always logical. You have to throw in the variables, and in this case, the variable happened to be Old Friends. And I'm going through today. There's a Glitterman, and
The Old Friends angle.
I've gone totally over the top with this.
Well, in fact, have we shown any of the pictures?
No, I wanted to mention, I went to your website last night and pulled up some pictures. I want to remind people that the website, oldfriendsequine.org, so if they want to know more about it, but pulled out some of these pictures, and this one was Bonnie's Poker and Kudo, and I just pulled this one out because I thought it was emblematic of Old Friends. There's
so
a couple
nice.
of Old Friends out in the paddock.
Yeah, there's Bonnie on the right. She was an amazing animal. She won 3 races in 10 days in the middle of winter for Oscar Barrera at Aqueduct. She also, more famous, of course, because she's the dam of Silver Charm, and she was donated to us by Chris Jakeman. There's Futuro. It's one of Diane's favorite horses.
And then, of course, familiar to New York fans,
A
Firm Success.
Yeah, Richard Schosberg and Mr. Freed. He came to us through the horse park, but Mr. Schosberg and Mr. Freed are very nice about helping us with the farm. And if we expand to New York, there's a chance that we might be able to get a Firm Success and Hidden Lake and some of these other horses that we have that did all their best running here at Saratoga and down at Belmont, up here at Cabin Creek.
Well, one of the things that everybody, those of you that aren't familiar with Old Friends and the opportunity to go visit the farms in Kentucky and then here now in New York, when you make your Saratoga plans, try to fold in, stay the extra day, stay on the Tuesday so you can go out just outside of Saratoga. When you come to Kentucky, you can stay at the bed and breakfast that Michael has. Make it a day trip, or there's people that have been coming and either staying with you or make an annual pilgrimage, maybe when they're going to Keeneland or the Churchill trips, they always tie in and visit Old Friends.
David Donk, of course, who trained a Wad, he brought all his family during spring break so they could spend some time with the Wad.
Nice.
Jim Bonds helped us a lot with Will's Way. Bill Mott's made some donations. Steve Asmussen's actually claimed some horses for us. I mean, you can really sense the momentum swinging in the right direction for these great athletes. Jim Brown, the famous football player, came to visit, and he's on a cane. And I said, you remind me of my horses. You're great athletes, and now you can't walk. So we're trying to do something with the retired NFL players too. So you never know.
Well, and Michael, oldfriendsequine.org is the website address. And if you weren't familiar, I know a lot of you listening are, but make an effort and find out what Michael's doing because he is tireless and remarkable. oldfriendsequine.org, O-R-G, and it'll open up a whole world to you if you haven't really explored the off-the-track thoroughbred experience and what's going on. The people that go out of their way on a daily basis. There's people that are patrolling the kill pens, and there's people that are literally scrounging up dollars and cents to rescue and save, retrain, and find homes for retired thoroughbreds. And there's a lot of rough things around our game. There's nothing more important that continues to kind of go under the radar than the efforts that all the retirement foundations and organizations and individuals put in. It's tough work, and everybody thanks you, Mike.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I have to say this. You wake up every morning, you see Gulch run against Commentator. How bad can that be?
Right in your backyard.
Yeah.
And again, up here Wednesday at Saratoga, there will be a day kind of honoring the retirement organization, so you can come up and be part of that as well. Michael, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much.
oldfriendsequine.org if you want some more information. Right now, we're going to wind things up for this week on Keyword Saratoga. I'm Seth Merrow, joined every Monday morning at 10:30 right here on Capital TV by Steve Bix. So join us again next Monday morning. Right now, we are going to wrap things up. Do want to remind you, though, that we are brought to you every week by Whitehall Stable and Karakoram Racing. I got the name right this
It was a good job. I want to thank the guests, Michael Blowen, Steve Asmussen, Ron Anderson. Good luck out there, everybody, as we wind down week 4.
Join the Karakoram racing team. As a partner with Karakoram, you will see your New York bred run at Aqueduct, Belmont, and Saratoga. You will get your picture taken in the winner's circle with trainers Linda Rice, Jeff Odens, and Jimmy Jerkins. Get started for as little as $4.99 and get the kind of excitement that can only come with owning a winning racehorse. Visit Karakoram.com, then call 888-521-RACE.
For comments or suggestions, please write to the General Manager at the OTB Television Network, 510 Smith Street, Schenectady, New York, 12305.